In this video, we're going to be talking about different types of welding. TIG welding, MIG welding, dual shield flux core, and stick welding. You got to have the metal cleaner with TIG welding than with other types of welding. At least it's more fun that way. Once you've got the metal prepped correctly, a nice tight arc where the arc length is equal to or less than the electrode diameter. Don't use too much torch angle, and keep the hot tip of that rod shielded with argon gas, and things will go pretty good for you. One of the main things to consider when you're TIG welding stainless steel is maintaining the stainless properties. And the way you do that, you don't use any other wire brushes other than stainless steel wire brushes that have only been used on stainless steel, and you limit your heat input, and chill bars can help an awful lot with discoloration as well as distortion. Here I'm using some aluminum angled chill bars on a little stainless steel manifold, and it's about 1/8 of an inch thick, and on carbon steel I would probably use about 125 amps. Stainless requires only about 2/3 the amperage that carbon steel does. I'm using a foot pedal. Sometimes a foot pedal is used, sometimes a foot pedal is not used in TIG welding. I prefer to use one whenever I can. Same things apply for TIG welding stainless steel, holding a nice tight arc, having good gas shielding, keeping that hot tip of the filler wire shielded with argon, and chill bars help a lot. All you need to do to switch over to aluminum is just change the polarity to AC and change filler wire, and you're off to the races. That's what makes TIG welding so versatile and so popular for welding all kinds of alloys. Same things apply. You probably hold a little bit longer arc on aluminum than you will on stainless steel, but don't get carried away. Don't get crazy. A good tight arc length will go a long way. TIG welding is also an excellent way to weld pipe. Here I'm welding a stainless flange to carbon pipe using 309 filler, using a technique where I move the arc forward and back, not side to side at all, but just strictly forward and back. The inside is purged out with argon, and that's the result. I like to walk the cup on pipe welding as much as anybody does, but sometimes it's better to freehand. And when you have to freehand, that does give you the ability to move forward and back and side to side a little bit more so than walking the cup. But for a uniform weld, walking the cup is hard to beat. And if you're in welding school, I suggest you take the time and pick the instructor's brain and get all the instruction and all the practice you can, because it is a highly paid skill to be able to walk the cup on pipe. Wire brushing a stainless steel weld while it's still kind of hot but not too awfully hot lets the oxides come off there pretty easily. TIG brazing is using silicon bronze or some other aluminum bronze or something like that, and where you're not really melting the base metal but you're just melting the filler metal. I find that about 2 pulses a second with about 20 or 30% background does a great job. For TIG brazing, it really helps to have an oversized cup. Next up, we're talking about MIG welding, mostly short circuit MIG welding for this video. That's a really useful process for light duty fabrication. The settings on the inside of most MIG welders are pretty good. They're a little hot for anything except for flat, horizontal, and overhead. But I'm going to use those recommended settings right now for 2 different T-joints, 2 different sides of a T-joint. The first one I'll use a slight push angle. I'll let it cool off all the way. And then for the other side, I will use a pull angle. And then we'll cut and etch, and we'll look at the difference in penetration. And I've done this about 100 times. I see so much discussion on which one's better, which one's proper, which one's right, which one's wrong on forums and good thing is that they're both can work. That's a good thing, because sometimes you absolutely have to do one or the other. And if you hold a tight stick out and you use a decent angle and don't get carried away with the angle, and you got your settings hot enough, both of them will work. And you'll find out in just a minute here when I do a cross section here and do a cut, polish, and etch that there's just not the difference in night and day like some people would have you to believe. Okay, which ones pull, which ones push. Slight differences, a little bit more crowned up on the pull, but the penetration is there on both of them. Now, again, those settings recommended for 1/4 inch are super hot. If you try to weld uphill with that with short circuit MIG, unless you're way better than I am, you're going to have a problem like this. It's so hot going uphill, it just wants to run out with you. So what I do is just I pick a setting about 1 or 2 metal thicknesses lower, still using the chart, but then also using a little technique like this little triangle technique, which steps me forward and still keeps the arc on the leading edge of the puddle, keeps me burning into the root of the joint, helps the metal spread out a little bit, gives me a little pattern for some uniformity, and makes a decent looking vertical uphill weld instead of one that falls out on my boots. Short circuit MIG is very useful for fabrication. It's not used much in heavy fabrication or out in the field in fabrication. At least it shouldn't be necessarily. It's used a lot of places where it shouldn't be. But for light fabrication like this, on 1/8 inch wall, square tubing, welded to some tread plate, making a platform, it's ideal. You're not going to burn through the 1/8 inch. It's really quick. There's no cleanup. It's really easy to make tack welds. There's no slag. You just have to recognize the limitations. And for 1/8 inch wall square tubing to 1/8 inch or 3/16 tread plate, there just aren't many limitations. You can weld uphill, you can weld downhill, side to side. It really does a good job on about 1/8 inch thick. 3/16 is about the limit where I would then start going uphill, but that all depends on a lot of things. Short circuit MIG isn't used a whole lot, once again, for heavy structural welding, but there are some plate tests given out there, especially just kind of entry-level tests to work you into pipe. Once again, your settings are going to be a good bit lower than the recommended settings on the inside of the MIG welder here. In this case, for this cover pass, I'm only using 17.7 volts, 200 inches a minute with 035 ER70S6 wire. These same settings for this plate will work just fine on the same thickness pipe, as long as the bevel is the same and the gap is the same and the land is the same. But basically you're just kind of scooting across the middle, not spending a lot of time, and pausing briefly on the edges and overlapping the edges of the bevel by only about a 1/16 of an inch, and then trying to progress evenly up the joint. And if you progress evenly and your timing is kind of even, you're going to have a uniform cover pass. Stick out is important, gun angle is important. Don't get carried away with either. Hold a pretty short stick out with a slight push angle. Things should go okay. This particular test joint, the root pass was done downhill and the subsequent passes were all done uphill, but that just depends on the procedure. Neither one is right or wrong. Tests are given both ways. If the test calls for an uphill root, you weld an uphill root. If it calls for downhill root, you weld a downhill root. This is the same type scenario on the same thickness, same bevel, same gap and everything on pipe. Downhill root, uphill fill, and cap. Whatever settings worked on that plate will work just fine on this pipe. In fact, you might not even notice the difference here. I'm using the same exact technique, trying to overlap those bevels by just about a 1/16 of an inch and get almost the same result. Do a little quick cut and etch here just to make sure there's no lack of fusion. You might hear me talk about cut and etch a lot. It's a great way to prove out a procedure. Dual shield flux core is an awesome process. You can go uphill, and you can go uphill really hot with hardly any torch manipulation and still get a good sound uniform bead. Very little manipulation right here, just almost none, and still comes out flat, uniform, not overly convex, and you just can't do that with short circuit MIG. Dual shield flux core also burns through mill scale a whole lot better than short circuit MIG. Sometimes, like on pipe welds, you might do a TIG root pass, and then you might follow that up with a hot pass using TIG to put a little bit more metal in there. But then you might switch over, for the sake of productivity, to dual shield flux core, when you'll get finished a whole lot quicker. It's really amazing how much metal dual shield flux core can put down. Very little cleanup too. I mean, a rake or two with a chip and hammer and it's ready to come back with the second pass or the third pass or whatever. This is almost the same technique you saw me using with short circuit MIG a while ago for the cover pass of pipe. You use a slightly longer stick out, same shielding gas, C25, and it's just a good hot puddle with very little cleanup. It does a great job, and you can get finished with a job quick. And if you're in business to make money, and let's face it, who isn't in business to make money? This is just one of those processes that gives you options. And here we're running off a small machine, a Lincoln 210MP. It does a great job, fills that pipe up quick. Stick welding, the bread and butter process, also called shielded metal arc welding. The goal when I was in school was to be able to pass a 6G test with a 6010 root. That's what was in demand, and that's also in demand today, 40 something years later. And so I had to do a lot of welding before I got to this. I had to use a lot of, different rods and 7018 T-joints, uphill, overhead, and everything. But this was the goal, to be able to put a root pass in with a 6010 on a 6G pipe test, because that's what paid the money. That's where the high-paying jobs were. It's good to be able to go uphill because some codes require the root pass to be put in uphill. Others, like API 1104, the oil and gas industry, are typically downhill. Same rod, sometimes a bigger rod, in this case a 532 going downhill on a 12-inch pipe, but still, you need to have the skill of being able to put a root pass in uphill or downhill with a 6010, and that'll get you paid. That'll get you a better job. Here's a hot pass on that 12-inch pipe. Incidentally, hot pass goals are mainly don't leave any voids or slag behind or cold lap or anything, but also don't blow through, don't remelt, don't reconfigure the good root you just put in. So that requires a little bit of skill in body positioning, how to move out with adequate speed, hold the right angle, the right arc length, so you don't screw up the root pass. Even if you can pass a pipe test and you become a pipe welder, you might be called upon to make structural welds. I know I was. I was a pipe welder, pipe fitter, but I had to weld pipe supports as well for long periods of time, actually. There were months at a time when I didn't do anything but 7018 on pipe supports. So it's good to have that skill as well. An awful lot of structural welds are not single pass welds because the structure itself might be 3/8, ½ inch, 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches thick or thicker. So you're going to have to do multi-pass welds with 7018 or maybe even 11018 low hydrogen rods. So learning how to stack beads evenly, make multi-pass fillet welds in the flat and horizontal, vertical uphill, and overhead is a useful skill. It'll pay off in the long run. For 7018, I had just found that running it kind of on the hot side for flat and horizontal will help a lot. And don't be scared of the heat on overhead. You see me doing a cut, polish, and etch here too, and you can really tell each layer of that weld. You can see the root pass and the subsequent two passes, and that's very informational. That's very instructive to do a cut and etch right after you weld something. You can really tell what happened. For vertical uphill with 7018, this is a technique that works for me. You don't really have to do much of anything, but it's just a subtle movement, like not a real huge movement, it's just a little movement that kind of keeps you uniform. This particular weld was done with 532 7018, as is this overhead joint here. This is my friend Andrew Carden, 165 amps here with a 532 7018, and we're using up a lot of used rods, so stubs, so it's like a ton of tie-ins on this joint. It's a 3-pass overhead T-joint. We're using a nice tight arc with not much rod angle, good hot amperage, and by using all those rod stubs, we've got a lot of practice with restarts on this weld. And there's a ton of restarts there, but you can't really tell it too much. Practicing your restarts is fundamental to stick welding. Here we're using the 532 again, 175 amps because the metal's a little bit thicker. That's a 1-inch thick base plate. But the same things apply whether you're on round or on flat structural shapes. Use a tight arc, don't get carried away with your rod angle, and use enough amperage. Use pretty much the same amperage as you would use for flat and horizontal for overhead. but that's where that tight arc really comes into play. And I can't emphasize it enough. Practice your restarts. You'll always have to make a lot of restarts when you're in tight spots, and being able to make a good restart is huge. Some rods don't lend themselves to welding vertical uphill and overhead and all that, and this is one of them. This is a big 3/16 diameter 7024. It's pretty much for flat and horizontal welding, and really kind of really for flat welding, because as you start to weld even a little bit horizontal, it can swirl around and get crazy with you, but it will lay down a lot of metal. It'll put down a big huge bead with a lot of heat input. Now, there's also times when you want to use a smaller rod. A 332 7018 is a super useful rod. 90 amps is a good hot setting for that. And here's a vertical weave. This is done a lot on Schedule 40 and Schedule 80 pipe, but also on heavy equipment repair, on gouged out cracks and things like that. And this is just a 1/8 7018 uphill practice pad a bead with 125 amps, which is something I highly recommend if you're having any trouble at all welding vertical uphill. Pad beads, get some seat time, get some hood time, get plenty of practice.